What would you do if the only way to save your dying mother was to marry a cold, ruthless billionaire who hides dangerous secrets behind his perfect smile? And what if the man you feared most had been watching you, protecting you, and obsessing over you since childhood? This is not just a love story, it's a suspenseful storm of sacrifice, obsession, betrayal, and a miracle no one saw coming. Stay till the end because the final twist will leave you breathless. And if you crave highly dramatic, emotional, edge-of-your-seat stories like this, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because the next story might just steal your heart. The night the doctors said her mother had 3 months to live was the night Mare's world stopped breathing. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and hopelessness, fluorescent lights flickering above her trembling body as she clutched the medical report that might as well have been a death sentence. Late-stage heart failure requiring an immediate transplant and specialized overseas treatment they could never afford. The cost printed in brutal black ink that mocked her poverty. She had already sold her father's old bookstore, pawned her jewelry, taken loans from neighbors who now avoided eye contact. Yet it wasn't enough, not even close. And as she sat outside the ICU listening to the rhythmic beeping of machines keeping her mother alive, she whispered a promise into the sterile air that she would save her no matter what it cost, even if it meant sacrificing herself. What she didn't know was that someone had been waiting for this exact moment for years. The offer came the next morning in the form of a sleek black car parked outside the hospital, a man in a tailored suit stepping out like he owned the world, his presence commanding silence, nurses staring, patients whispering. His name was Zion Shah, CEO of a multinational conglomerate, known across the city for his ruthless business tactics and icy demeanor. A man who never smiled and never lost. And when his dark eyes met hers, Mare felt an inexplicable chill, as if he recognized her in ways she didn't understand. He spoke calmly, almost gently, telling her he knew about her mother's condition, that he could pay for everything, surgery, transplant, the best doctors abroad. But there was a condition, a contract marriage for 1 year to satisfy his grandfather's dying wish and secure a critical inheritance clause that required him to appear settled. It would be a marriage on paper, separate rooms, no interference in each other's lives, and at the end of 12 months she would walk away with her mother alive and a financial settlement that would ensure they never struggled again. Mare should have refused, should have run, because nothing about him felt simple. But when she returned to the ICU and saw her mother's fragile body tangled in wires, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath, she broke. She signed the contract with trembling hands, unaware that the fine print was the least dangerous part of this deal. The wedding was private and cold, held in Zion's ancestral mansion under crystal chandeliers that glittered like judgmental stars. No friends, no family from her side except her unconscious mother whose surgery had already been scheduled in Switzerland under his arrangements. His grandfather blessed them with teary eyes, whispering something to Zion that made his jaw tighten, and when Zion placed the ring on her finger, his touch lingered a second too long, a flicker of something intense passing through his gaze, something that was not indifference. Living in his mansion felt like stepping into a gilded cage. Servants addressed her as Madam, the media speculated about the mysterious bride, and Zion remained distant yet watchful, his presence everywhere even when unseen. She would find fresh lilies in her room, the same flowers she used to love as a child though she hadn't mentioned it to anyone in years. Her favorite childhood dessert appearing on the dining table without request, a rare book she once searched for during university placed silently on her nightstand. Coincidences, she told herself, but coincidences don't memorize the tiny details of a stranger's past. He never crossed the physical boundaries outlined in the contract. Yet his eyes followed her with a possessiveness that both unsettled and warmed her, especially on nights when thunderstorms rattled the windows and she felt small in the massive room. Once, during a power outage, she gasped in the dark only for a flashlight beam to steady her breathing as his voice murmured, "You're safe," and she wondered how he knew darkness terrified her. Meanwhile, her mother's surgery succeeded against medical odds, doctors calling it a miracle recovery, and Mare wept with gratitude, hugging Zion impulsively in the hospital hallway before realizing what she'd done. For a fraction of a second his arms tightened around her as if he'd been waiting years for that embrace. Then he stepped back, mask of indifference sliding into place, telling her it was simply part of the agreement. But miracles rarely come without shadows, and soon she began receiving anonymous messages, photographs of her from years ago, images from her school days, candid shots she never knew existed. a picture of her standing in the rain at 16, crying outside her burnt-down bookstore after an accidental fire destroyed her father's legacy. The message attached read, "He was there even then." Her blood ran cold. She confronted Zion, fury shaking her voice, demanding to know if he had been stalking her. Instead of denying it, he asked quietly, "Do you remember the boy who used to sit in the last row of your classroom, always alone?" She tried to recall, fragments of memory surfacing. A quiet scholarship student, bruised knuckles, eyes too intense for a teenager. She had once shared her lunch with him when others mocked his worn-out uniform, had once hugged him impulsively when she found him bleeding after bullies cornered him behind the gym, whispering that no one deserved to feel invisible. She hadn't known his name back then. "That was me," Zion said, voice stripped of its usual steel, and the world tilted. He told her everything in pieces over several nights, how her small acts of kindness became his anchor in a life filled with humiliation and violence from a stepfather who despised weakness, how the day her family's bookstore burned he had seen her collapse in the rain and wanted to run to her but lacked the power, how he swore that one day he would become strong enough to shield her from every storm. He had built his empire with obsession fueling him, tracking her achievements from afar, ensuring scholarships were anonymously granted when she needed them, pulling strings to secure her first job. And when he learned about her mother's illness he realized fate had finally placed her within reach. The contract marriage wasn't for inheritance, it was the only way he could claim her without revealing a love that bordered on madness. Mare felt betrayed and overwhelmed, torn between gratitude and anger. She was not a charity project nor a childhood fantasy to be possessed, yet the sincerity in his confession cracked something inside her. Still, she demanded space, unsure whether to fear his obsession or surrender to the tenderness hidden beneath it. Before she could decide, danger struck. Zion's business rival, a cunning tycoon threatened by his dominance, leaked rumors that the marriage was fraudulent, sending investigators to dig into Mare's past, even orchestrating a staged accident targeting her mother's recovery center abroad. The car crash left her mother in critical condition again, and this time the doctors were not hopeful. In the chaos that followed, Mare discovered another devastating truth. Zion had enemies more dangerous than she imagined, and loving him meant stepping into a battlefield. She overheard a conversation revealing that the accident might have been retaliation for Zion's secret vendetta against the same rival. A vendetta rooted in childhood abuse networks and corruption tied to his stepfather, everything connected in a web of power and revenge, and she realized she had never truly known the man she married. When she confronted him about risking her mother's safety in his war, he shattered for the first time, confessing that he had dismantled entire criminal operations to protect vulnerable children like they once were, that his rival funded those horrors, and that marrying her publicly had exposed his weakest point. "They will use you to break me," he admitted, voice hoarse, "and I will burn the world before I let them." Her mother's condition worsened overnight, organs failing, doctors preparing Mare for goodbye. She collapsed in the hospital chapel, questioning every decision, wondering if her sacrifice had doomed the very person she tried to save. That was when an elderly nurse approached with tears in her eyes, revealing a miracle donor match had been found at the last possible hour. A heart flown in through extraordinary influence, paperwork cleared in record time. Mare later discovered Zion had offered a staggering sum to accelerate the transplant list, leveraging every favor he'd ever earned, even blackmailing politicians connected to the rival to ensure the surgery proceeded without interference. It was reckless and illegal and desperate, but it saved her mother's life again. During the tense hours of surgery, gunshots erupted outside the hospital. The rival's men attempted to abduct Mare, seeing her as leverage, and chaos exploded in corridors of white. Zion arrived like a storm, security forces in tow, shielding her with his body as bullets shattered glass, his calm replaced by lethal precision. She saw not a cold businessman but a man forged in survival, willing to bleed for her. When one attacker aimed directly at her, Zion stepped in front and took the bullet in his shoulder without hesitation. Time slowed as crimson stained his shirt, his body collapsing yet his hand still gripping hers as he whispered, "I promised you're safe." The police intervened, the rival arrested under mounting evidence of corruption Zion had secretly gathered for years. As surgeons worked simultaneously on her mother and her husband, Mare realized the contract that began as sacrifice had transformed into something fierce and undeniable. She sat between two operating rooms praying for both lives, understanding that obsession born from pain can either destroy or redeem, and in Zion's case it had done both. Hours later, Doctors announced successful surgeries, her mother stabilized, Zion out of danger. Miracles rarely come twice, yet that night they did. When Zion awoke days later, pale but alive, he expected her to leave once the year ended, convinced he didn't deserve real love after manipulating fate to bind her to him. Instead, Mare placed the torn contract papers on his hospital tray and told him she chose him. Not out of debt or gratitude, but because she saw the broken boy who once needed a hug and the man who crossed fire to keep his promise. She set one condition. No more secrets, no more obsession in shadows, only partnership built on truth. Tears he never allowed in boardrooms escaped silently as he nodded, realizing that the love he guarded like a secret weapon had finally been returned freely. Months later, at a public charity gala dedicated to rebuilding schools and bookstores for underprivileged children, Zion announced the dissolution of the contractual terms of their marriage, declaring before flashing cameras that his wife was never an obligation but his greatest blessing. The crowd applauded, unaware of the blood and bullets that forged this union. Mare's mother, radiant and healthy, held her daughter's hand with pride, calling their survival nothing short of divine intervention. And as Mare looked at the man who had once been the lonely boy in the last row, she understood that fate had woven their lives together long before contracts and billion-dollar empires, that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you unknowingly saved first. Yet even in happiness, a final mystery lingered. One evening while organizing old documents in Zion's study, Mare found a worn notebook hidden behind legal files. Inside were dated entries spanning 15 years. Every milestone of her life recorded in careful handwriting, from the day she won a poetry competition to the day she cried in the rain after the bookstore fire, ending with a single recent line: "She chose me willingly today. I can finally stop watching from the shadows." Instead of fear, she felt an overwhelming surge of love mixed with awe at the depth of his devotion. She closed the notebook gently and walked toward the balcony where he stood watching the sunset, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He stiffened, still not used to being loved without conditions, and she whispered that obsession born from loneliness had transformed into a miracle born from choice. In the end, the girl who married to save her mother discovered she had also healed a wounded soul who built an empire just to be worthy of her. Their story spread quietly as one of those rare urban legends where sacrifice met destiny, where suspense gave way to salvation, and where a contract meant to expire became a vow that would last beyond lifetimes. And if you listen closely on stormy nights, you might hear echoes of a promise spoken in darkness. You're safe. A reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with romance, but with rescue, not with destiny, but with a desperate decision that changes everything.